The world of international relations is often a complex tapestry. It is woven with threads of cooperation, competition, and at times, outright conflict. In this intricate dance, diplomatic engagements serve as crucial platforms. They allow nations to articulate their positions and seek common ground. They also test the resilience of alliances and the firmness of national resolve. Recently, such a moment unfolded in Berlin, Germany. India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar was present. His visit underscored the shifting dynamics of global power and the persistent challenges that nations face, particularly the scourge of terrorism which respects no borders. The joint press conference featuring Minister Jaishankar and his German counterpart, Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul, became a focal point. It was not merely a routine diplomatic exchange. Instead, it offered a clear window into India's evolving foreign policy posture. This posture is increasingly characterized by assertiveness and a clear-eyed assessment of its security imperatives. The discussions in Berlin were set against a backdrop of heightened tensions in South Asia. A recent brutal terrorist attack had once again brought the region to a precipice, demanding both condemnation and decisive action from the international community and from India itself, which has long been a victim of cross-border terrorism. Germany, a key player within the European Union and a significant voice on the global stage, provided the venue for these critical discussions. Its role is particularly noteworthy. Berlin has consistently advocated for a rules-based international order. It has also emphasized the importance of diplomatic solutions to complex geopolitical problems. Therefore, its reaction to the events unfolding in South Asia and its engagement with India on these matters carried considerable weight. The statements emerging from this meeting would be closely scrutinized by capitals around the world, each looking for signals about the future trajectory of regional stability and international counter-terrorism efforts. The context of Jaishankar's visit extended beyond the immediate crisis. His European tour, which also included stops in the Netherlands and Denmark, was part of a broader Indian strategy. This strategy aims to bolster diplomatic ties and garner support for India's positions on a range of global issues. However, the shadow of terrorism, particularly emanating from Pakistan, loomed large over the proceedings in Berlin. The firmness of Jaishankar's articulation of India's stance, coupled with Germany's response, offered a compelling narrative about how nations are navigating the perilous waters of modern geopolitics, where dialogue and deterrence must often walk hand in hand. The immediate catalyst for the heightened diplomatic activity and India's robust response was a horrific act of violence. On April 22, 2025, the serene tourist resort of Pahalgam in Jammu and Kashmir became a scene of carnage. Terrorists launched a brutal attack, callously targeting innocent civilians. This heinous act resulted in the tragic loss of 26 lives. The Pahalgam attack was not an isolated incident. It was sadly another grim chapter in the long and painful history of terrorism that India has endured. The choice of target, a popular tourist destination, was clearly intended to maximize fear and gain international attention for the perpetrators and their sponsors. The brutality of the Pahalgam attack sent shockwaves across India and elicited condemnation from around the world. It served as a stark reminder of the persistent threat posed by terrorist groups operating with impunity from across the border. For India, this was more than just a law and order problem. It was a direct assault on its sovereignty and the security of its citizens. The incident immediately put the Indian government under immense pressure to respond effectively and to ensure that such attacks would not go unpunished. The nation mourned, but there was also a growing demand for decisive action to hold those responsible accountable for their despicable actions. The nature of the attack, targeting civilians in a place known for its natural beauty and tranquility, highlighted the cruel and indiscriminate tactics employed by terrorist organizations. These groups, often nurtured and supported by external state actors, seek to destabilize the region and undermine efforts towards peace and development. The Pahalgam incident underscored the urgent need for a more concerted global effort to combat terrorism in all its forms and manifestations. It also reinforced India's long-standing position that there can be no distinction between good and bad terrorists, and that the infrastructure of terror, wherever it exists, must be dismantled completely and without reservation. The timing of the attack, just weeks before significant diplomatic engagements, further complicated the regional security landscape. It raised critical questions about the intentions of those behind the violence. Were they attempting to derail diplomatic processes, or to provoke a wider conflict? Regardless of the motive, the consequence was clear. India was compelled to reassess its security posture and to communicate in no uncertain terms its resolve to protect its people and its territorial integrity. The blood spilled in Pahalgam became a solemn impetus for the strong measures that were to follow, shaping India's subsequent diplomatic and military responses. In the aftermath of the appalling Pahalgam terror attack, India's response was swift and resolute. The government, under pressure to act decisively, launched Operation Sindoor. This operation was not merely a symbolic gesture. It was a carefully planned and executed series of precision military strikes. The targets were specific known terror bases located within Pakistan. These bases were instrumental in training, equipping, and launching terrorists into Indian territory. The operation aimed to degrade the capabilities of these terrorist outfits and send an unequivocal message that India would not tolerate such brazen acts of aggression originating from across its borders any longer. Operation Sindoor targeted 9 different locations within Pakistan. Among these were the headquarters of Lashkar-e-Taiba in Muridka and the operational base of Jaish-e-Mohammed in Bahawalpur. These organizations have been responsible for numerous terrorist attacks in India over the years. They are also listed as international terrorist groups by the United Nations. The strikes were described as precision-guided, focusing on terror camps, and also targeting Pakistani military positions that were identified as actively supporting cross-border infiltration. This demonstrated a new level of Indian resolve to take the fight to the source of the terror, even if it meant crossing the line of control under specific, constrained military objectives. The Indian military executed these strikes with a focus on minimizing collateral damage, aiming specifically at the terror infrastructure. However, the message to Pakistan was unambiguous. India possesses both the capability and the political will to undertake direct action to protect its national security interests. This marked a significant evolution in India's counter-terrorism strategy, moving beyond purely defensive measures to include proactive, retaliatory strikes. The name Operation Sindoor itself carries symbolic weight, often associated with a mark of commitment and auspiciousness in Indian culture, perhaps signaling a determined new beginning in its fight against terror. Following Operation Sindoor, Pakistan attempted to retaliate. Over a period of 3 days, it launched drones and missiles targeting Indian military and civilian locations. However, these attempts were largely thwarted by India's robust air defense systems, which successfully intercepted most of the incoming projectiles. This failed retaliation further highlighted the asymmetry in conventional capabilities and perhaps influenced Pakistan's subsequent decision. Soon after its unsuccessful countermeasures, Pakistan sought a ceasefire. India, having achieved its immediate objectives of degrading terror infrastructure and signaling its resolve, agreed to the cessation of hostilities, which was reportedly achieved through direct negotiations between the two countries. In the highly charged atmosphere following the Pahalgam attack and Operation Sindoor, the diplomatic arena became critically important. External affairs. Minister S. Jaishankar's visit to Germany provided a key platform for India to articulate its position and garner international understanding. During a joint press conference in Berlin, German Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul addressed the recent events with notable clarity. He unequivocally condemned the terrorist attack that had occurred in Pahalgam on April 22. His words resonated strongly, offering a measure of solace and solidarity to a nation grappling with the aftermath of senseless violence. Minister Wadephul stated, "We were all appalled by the brutal terrorist attack on India on April 22. We condemn this attack on civilians in the strongest terms. This condemnation was not just a diplomatic formality, it was a clear affirmation of Germany's stance against terrorism in all its forms." Crucially, Minister Wadephul also affirmed India's inherent right to defend itself against such acts of terror. This acknowledgement from a leading European power was significant for India. It provided international legitimacy for the defensive measures India had undertaken, including the proactive steps taken under Operation Sindoor to neutralize threats emanating from across its border. S. Jaishankar, in his remarks, acknowledged and appreciated Germany's principled stand. He specifically noted Germany's understanding of India's sovereign right to defend its security and protect its citizens. This mutual understanding between New Delhi and Berlin on the critical issue of counter-terrorism highlighted a growing convergence in their strategic perspectives. Germany's expression of solidarity was not taken lightly in India. It was seen as a testament to the strength of bilateral ties and a shared commitment to upholding international law while combating global terrorism, a menace that threatens democratic societies everywhere. The German support extended beyond mere words. It reflected a broader European concern about the rise of terrorism and the need for robust responses. By backing India's right to self-defense, Germany effectively endorsed the principle that nations victimized by cross-border terrorism cannot be expected to remain passive. This stance, coming from a country like Germany which typically emphasizes diplomatic solutions, underscored the severity of the situation and the justification for India's actions. It also sent a subtle but important message to Pakistan regarding the international community's diminishing tolerance for states that harbor or support terrorist entities on their soil. Section 5. Jaishankar's Doctrine, Zero Tolerance and Bilateral Resolve. During the joint press conference in Berlin, External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar articulated India's position with remarkable firmness and clarity. His statements constituted what might be termed the Jaishankar Doctrine on dealing with Pakistan-sponsored terrorism. A cornerstone of this doctrine is an absolute zero-tolerance policy towards terrorism. He left no room for ambiguity, emphasizing that India would not make any compromises when it came to threats against its national security and the lives of its citizens. This uncompromising stance was a direct message to Pakistan and its state-sponsored terror proxies that their actions would invariably invite a strong and decisive Indian response. A second critical element of Jaishankar's articulation was India's unwavering commitment to dealing with Pakistan strictly on a bilateral basis. He emphatically stated that India would not be drawn into multilateral forums or third-party mediations concerning its disputes with Pakistan, especially those related to terrorism. This assertion powerfully underscored India's confidence in its own capabilities to manage its neighborhood challenges. Furthermore, Jaishankar boldly declared that India would not succumb to nuclear blackmail. This was a particularly pointed remark, addressing Pakistan's oft-repeated veiled threats of using its nuclear arsenal to deter conventional Indian responses to acts of terror. Jaishankar did not mince words when identifying the source of the problem. He pointed out that many of the most notorious terrorists, individuals formally sanctioned by the United Nations, continue to reside and operate openly in Pakistan. He highlighted that these terrorists often enjoy overt state and military support within Pakistan, a situation that is untenable and a direct violation of international obligations. This direct accusation, made on an international stage alongside a key European partner, aimed to expose the duplicity of Pakistan's claims of fighting terrorism while simultaneously providing safe havens and support to globally proscribed terrorist groups. The minister reiterated India's preparedness to respond decisively to any future terror attacks that might originate from Pakistani soil. This was not a threat, but a clear statement of intent based on past experience and the demonstrated willingness to act, as seen in Operation Sindoor. This forward-looking warning served to establish clear red lines. It signaled that India's strategic restraint should not be mistaken for weakness, and that the onus for maintaining peace and stability in the region rested squarely on Pakistan's willingness and ability to dismantle the terror infrastructure operating from its territory, and to cease its policy of using terrorism as an instrument of state policy. Section 6. The Tightrope Walk. Berlin's call for dialogue amidst support. While Germany offered robust support for India's right to self-defense and strongly condemned the terrorism India faced, Berlin also carefully balanced its position. Alongside its expressions of solidarity, the German government, through Foreign Minister Johann Wadephul, urged both India and Pakistan to find a path towards resolving their outstanding issues through dialogue. This call for peaceful resolution is consistent with Germany's long-standing foreign policy, which prioritizes diplomacy and de-escalation in conflict situations. Berlin's approach, therefore, was a nuanced one, supporting India's immediate security concerns while simultaneously advocating for a longer-term peaceful settlement of disputes in the region. Foreign Minister Wadephul specifically appreciated the establishment of a truce following Operation Sindoor and Pakistan's attempted retaliation. He emphasized the critical importance of stable and sustained dialogue between New Delhi and Islamabad. In Germany's view, such dialogue is the most viable means to find durable bilateral solutions to the complex issues that have long plagued relations between the two South Asian neighbors. This dual message, support for India's anti-terror actions and a plea for dialogue, reflects the difficult tightrope that international partners often have to walk when dealing with deeply entrenched regional conflicts, especially those involving nuclear-armed states. Germany's call for dialogue should not be misinterpreted as a dilution of its support for India's stance against terrorism. Rather, it represents a pragmatic approach that recognizes that while security measures are necessary to address immediate threats, lasting peace can only be achieved through political engagement and a mutual commitment to resolving differences peacefully. Berlin's position acknowledges the complexities of the India-Pakistan relationship, understanding that a cycle of violence and retaliation serves no one's long-term interests. The emphasis was on finding a sustainable mechanism for communication that could prevent future crises and build a modicum of trust. India, while appreciative of Germany's overall support, has its own clearly defined perspectives on dialogue with Pakistan. Minister Jaishankar's firm stance on bilateralism, as articulated in Berlin, indicated that while India is not averse to dialogue in principle, the conditions for such engagement must be conducive. This means primarily an end to cross-border terrorism and Pakistan taking credible, verifiable, and irreversible action against terrorist groups operating from its soil. Germany's balanced approach, therefore, found resonance in acknowledging India's security imperatives while upholding the universal ideal of peaceful conflict resolution through sustained diplomatic engagement. Section 7. The primacy of bilateralism, India's stance on mediation. A crucial aspect of India's foreign policy, particularly concerning its relations with Pakistan, is the steadfast insistence on bilateralism, external affairs. Minister S. Jaishankar powerfully reiterated this principle during his discussions in Germany. He made it abundantly clear that India views its issues with Pakistan, including the contentious matter of Jammu and Kashmir and the pervasive threat of cross-border terrorism, as matters to be resolved directly between New Delhi and Islamabad. This position effectively rules out any role for third-party mediation or intervention, regardless of how well-intentioned such offers might be from international actors. This insistence on bilateral engagement is not a new development in Indian diplomacy. For decades, India has consistently rejected offers of mediation from various countries, including in the past from the United States under different administrations, notably President Donald Trump. The rationale behind this stance is rooted in the belief that third-party involvement often complicates issues further, potentially introducing external agendas that may not align with India's core interests. Furthermore, India maintains that the Simla Agreement of 1972 and the Lahore Declaration of 1999 provide a solid framework for bilateral dispute resolution, agreements which Pakistan is also a signatory to. When India does speak of bilateral talks with Pakistan, it has a very specific and limited agenda in mind. The primary focus of any such dialogue, from India's perspective, must be on the issue of Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, and critically, the complete cessation of state-sponsored terrorism emanating from Pakistani territory. India argues that a conducive atmosphere, free from the shadow of terror and violence, is a prerequisite for any meaningful and sustainable dialogue process. Until Pakistan demonstrates a genuine commitment to dismantling the terror infrastructure it harbors, the prospects for comprehensive talks remain bleak, according to New Delhi's stated policy. Minister Jaishankar's firm articulation of this long-held position in Berlin served to remind the international community of India's unwavering stance. It signaled that while India values its partnerships with countries like Germany and appreciates their understanding and support in the fight against terrorism, its approach to resolving core issues with Pakistan will remain strictly bilateral. This clarity is important as it manages expectations and underscores India's assertion of its sovereign prerogative to determine the modalities of its engagement with its neighbors, particularly on matters that directly impact its national security and territorial integrity. Section 8. Forging Alliances, the Quest for International Consensus Against Terror. India's diplomatic outreach, exemplified by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar's tour of Europe, is a crucial component of its broader strategy to combat terrorism. Beyond immediate retaliatory measures like Operation Sindoor, New Delhi understands the paramount importance of building a strong international consensus against the menace of terrorism. This involves sensitizing global partners to the specific threats India faces, particularly state-sponsored cross-border terrorism, and garnering support for its actions and its principled stance. The positive reception in Berlin, with Germany's condemnation of the Pahalgam attack and affirmation of India's right to self-defense, was a significant step in this direction. The effort to build international support is multifaceted. It includes sharing detailed intelligence with friendly nations about terrorist groups, their sources of funding, their training camps, and their state sponsors. An all-party delegation from India has also been actively engaging with world leaders, presenting a unified national perspective on the challenge of terrorism. This collective diplomatic endeavor aims to isolate states that support terror and to strengthen international legal frameworks and cooperative mechanisms for counterterrorism. The goal is to create an environment where it becomes increasingly difficult for terrorist organizations to operate and for their sponsors to escape accountability. Germany's appreciation for India's defensive measures, as expressed by Foreign Minister Wadaful, lends considerable weight to India's narrative. When a major European power, known for its cautious and peace-oriented foreign policy, acknowledges the legitimacy of India's actions, it sends a powerful signal to the rest of the world. This support is not just symbolic. It can translate into more concrete cooperation in areas such as intelligence sharing, capacity building, and the implementation of sanctions against terrorist entities and individuals. The clear statement from Jaishankar regarding the presence of UN-sanctioned terrorists operating freely in Pakistan further highlights the need for concerted global pressure. The quest for international consensus also involves highlighting the double standards that are sometimes apparent in the global fight against terror. India has long argued that terrorism cannot be compartmentalized or justified based on motivations or geography. The support from countries like Germany helps reinforce the principle that terrorism anywhere is a threat to peace and stability everywhere. By forging stronger alliances and speaking with a united voice, the international community can more effectively counter the ideologies that fuel terrorism and dismantle the networks that sustain it, ultimately contributing to a safer world for all nations. Section 9. Navigating the future implications for South Asian stability and global order. The recent diplomatic exchanges in Berlin, set against the backdrop of renewed tensions between India and Pakistan, carry significant implications for the future of South Asian stability. India's firm response to the Pahalgam terror attack, exemplified by Operation Sindoor and S. Jaishankar's unambiguous statements, signals a potentially more assertive Indian posture in dealing with cross-border terrorism. This approach, characterized by a willingness to undertake proactive measures and an insistence on bilateral resolution without nuclear coercion, could reshape the security calculus in the region. Much will depend on Pakistan's response and its willingness to address India's core concerns regarding terror infrastructure on its soil. The international support garnered by India, particularly from influential nations like Germany, is a critical factor. Germany's condemnation of terrorism and its backing of India's right to self-defense, coupled with its call for dialogue, reflect a balanced yet principled approach. This international understanding can empower India to maintain its firm stance while also creating diplomatic space for potential de-escalation and future engagement should conditions permit. The clear message to Pakistan is that the global community is increasingly intolerant of state-sponsored terrorism, and that continued support for such activities will lead to greater international isolation and pressure. For broader regional peace, the onus significantly lies on Pakistan to take credible and verifiable steps to dismantle terrorist sanctuaries. The presence of UN-designated terrorists operating with impunity, as highlighted by Minister Jaishankar, remains a major impediment to any meaningful dialogue or lasting peace. If Pakistan chooses to genuinely act against these groups, it could pave the way for a reduction in tensions and a resumption of constructive engagement with India. Conversely, a failure to do so will likely perpetuate the cycle of violence and mistrust, further destabilizing a region that is already fraught with complexities and historical grievances. Ultimately, the events surrounding the Pahalgam attack, Operation Sindoor, and the diplomatic engagements in Germany underscore a critical juncture for South Asia and for the global fight against terrorism. India's bold stand, supported by key international partners, has demonstrated a commitment to protecting its security interests. However, sustainable peace requires more than just defensive measures. It necessitates a genuine commitment from all parties to renounce violence, address underlying issues through peaceful dialogue, and work towards a future where terrorism no longer casts its dark shadow over the region. The path ahead is challenging, but the clarity of purpose shown by India offers a new dynamic in this long-standing conflict.